Week 13 of the 2013 season has arrived. Things are about to get serious. No more byes. All 32 teams in action this week. Several games with tremendous playoff significance. Thanksgiving week, of course, so we have 3 games on Thursday. The night game, the final Thursday game, to me is the most interesting. Now, all 3 relatively interesting. Green Bay, Detroit, certainly a big game in the NFC North, even though both those teams have been struggling. Oakland, Dallas, I guess that's the worst game of the 3. Dallas, a 9.5-point favorite on BETDAQ. Tough to see Oakland hanging with them with Matt McGloin at quarterback. But the final game, Pittsburgh at Baltimore, that should be a really good one. Baltimore, a 1-point favorite on BETDAQ. 40.5 the total in that game. This game, tremendously important. Both these teams at 5-6. There are 6 AFC teams at 5-6 right now, and 5-6 would be the final wild card spot, the final playoff spot in the AFC. The Tennessee Titans, if the season ended today, would win the tiebreaker and get that spot. But a lot of football left to be played. As we said, 6 5-6 teams. These teams also only 2 games back of first in the AFC North. So if they can chase down the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously that wild card talk is irrelevant. These teams played a little over a month ago, Pittsburgh pulling out a 19-16 win. Seems like every time the Steelers and Ravens play comes down to a field goal, and we expect this one to be very tight again because we really don't think either one of these teams are good enough offensively to run away from the other, and both these teams good defensively as usual. Now this year, Baltimore has been a little bit better defensively than Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh has been better offensively. The Steelers got off to a slow start on offense the first 3 or 4 weeks. They were one of the worst offenses in the league, but they've really picked it up over the last few weeks. They're now top half of the league in total yards per game, top half of the league in passing offense. The Ravens have been playing very, very well on the defensive side of the ball. They put themselves in a hole after week 1, allowing 49 points to the Denver Broncos. But they've played very well since then. They now rank top 10 in the league in both yards allowed and points allowed. So we don't expect a whole lot of scoring in this game. That is why we see a low total like 40.5. As we said, these teams combined for 35 points the last time they played. To me, if Baltimore is going to win this game, it's going to be their defense that shuts down the Pittsburgh offense. The Ravens have been really bad offensively lately. 6 straight games, they've scored 20 points or fewer. They're just bad on the offensive line, so they haven't been able to get their running game going at all. Joe Flacco is not surrounded by the type of weaponry that he was last year. Too often this season, the Ravens' passing game is just the Torrey Smith show. That's not going to cut it against a defense like Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's been excellent defensively with the exception of 2 games. They played really poorly against New England and in the first half of the Detroit game. And those 2 games have really distorted the statistics a bit. Pittsburgh a little bit better defensively than their 13th overall ranking would indicate. You saw them last week just smother that Cleveland Browns offense. As we said, Baltimore's really been struggling offensively, so I believe if the Ravens are going to win this game, it's going to be with defense. So if you like the Ravens here, I think it makes a lot of sense to also like the under. Baltimore -1, under 40.5. I think those bets sort of go together. I'm not sure I'm on that page, though. I think the Steelers might win this game. Just think they're a little bit better than Baltimore. Now, the fact this game is in Baltimore and the Ravens are so good at home, that definitely concerns me a bit. Not sure I'm going to get involved, but I might, because I know I'm going to be watching the game, really looking forward to the game. I do think Pittsburgh, they're just clearly better offensively. That Pittsburgh offense has made some strides. Le'Veon Bell, even though he's not putting up huge numbers in terms of yards per carry, they're giving him the ball about 20 times a game, and he's given them a presence in the running game. Antonio Brown having one of the best seasons a Steeler wide receiver has ever had. Ben Roethlisberger has been good as usual. So I lean towards Pittsburgh in that game, but wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens won. And as I said, if you lean towards Baltimore, I think it makes a lot of sense to lean towards the under as well, because don't think the Baltimore offense is going to put up a whole lot of points, because they haven't been putting up a whole lot of points on anybody. But I do think there's a chance that the Baltimore defense could totally shut down the Steelers and the Ravens could win the game that way. Now, a lot of interesting games on Sunday. Certainly 2 very interesting games in the AFC with Cincinnati at San Diego, Denver at Kansas City. But I'd like to talk about 3 games from the NFL's best division. That would be the NFC West. Worst team in the NFC West is the St. Louis Rams. The Rams are 5-6, playing their best football of the season. That's a pretty good worst team in your division. And, of course, the best team in the West could be the best team in the entire NFC, the Seattle Seahawks. They have a great Monday night matchup this week with the Saints. Would like to talk about that game in a second. First, what about the Arizona Cardinals going on the road to face the Philadelphia Eagles? The Cardinals have really been a surprise team. They're at 7-4, tied with San Francisco for second place in the NFC West, right there in the mix in terms of the wild card. Now, the Eagles have really turned it around as well over the last few weeks. Everybody, myself included, was off that Philadelphia bandwagon after they went back-to-back games without producing an offensive touchdown against two defenses that were really struggling at that time, of course, Dallas and the New York Giants. But Philadelphia has turned things around. They're now 6-5, tied for first in the NFC East. I'm now sort of back on board with the Eagles and this Chip Kelly offense. They're top 5 in the league in total yards per game, rush yards per game. Now, this game's going to be sort of a litmus test. Has this Chip Kelly offense really turned the corner, and is this a true top 5 offense? Because, they were still good statistically heading into those two games, and even after those two games where they were shut down. I believe that was in weeks 7 and 8. And that sort of threw everybody for a loop. People said, hey, defensive coordinators have figured out this Chip Kelly offense, but then they went on the road in Oakland and were just unstoppable against a Raiders defense that had been pretty good heading into that game and has been pretty good since. Nick Foles has been named the starter for the rest of the season in Philadelphia. So that takes away a little bit of that running element from the quarterback position, but Foles has been so good. 16 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions this year. They really have to make that move, in my opinion. And Foles does throw the ball better than Michael Vick. If you're talking about a pure pocket passer, Vick, of course, brings that element of running the ball from the quarterback position, which many people, myself included, thought was needed, necessary in the Chip Kelly offense for it to work. Early in the season, I didn't think it was going to be able to work with Nick Foles because I thought the way that offense operates, you needed a quarterback who could run the football. All of Kelly's quarterbacks at Oregon could run. Now, to his credit, Kelly always said that any type of quarterback would work in his offense. He always said a pocket passer would work, and that's proven true here over the last few weeks. But as we said, a litmus test here on Sunday because the Arizona Cardinals, excellent defensively, 8th in total defense, 8th in points allowed. They're especially good against the run, 2nd in the NFL in rushing defense. And this Philadelphia offense, it's a spread offense, but it's a run-based spread offense. What they do is built around the running of now LaShawn McCoy, because as we said, the quarterback isn't running the ball as much these days, but they're still running the ball a whole lot in Philadelphia. And if you can shut down that running game, I believe you shut down this offense. Can the Arizona Cardinals do it on the road? And interesting to see. The Cardinals have lost 3 of their five road games this season. Their only 2 road wins have been against Tampa Bay, and that was back in September when the Bucs were really struggling, and Jacksonville. So they've beaten 2 bad teams on the road. They've lost their other 3 road games. Now we know Philadelphia was terrible at home. They finally won at home this past week, actually 2 weeks ago, because the Eagles are coming off a bye. That's another thing to consider here. The Eagles coming off a bye, they should be rested and ready. Have an early lean towards Philadelphia in this game, even though I do think the total looks a little bit high, 48.5 the total. As we said, the Arizona Cardinals have been excellent defensively, and they're not very good on offense. And even though Philadelphia statistically is still towards the bottom of the league in most of the defensive rankings, the Eagles don't look now, but they've been playing a lot better on the defensive side of the ball over these last few weeks. So wouldn't be surprised if this game stays under 48.5, even though I do have a Philadelphia lean. And I would think most people who would have a Philadelphia lean would also lean towards over, because you think, well, if Philadelphia is going to win this game, that might mean that the Arizona defense is just not going to be able to slow down Philadelphia. Not necessarily sure that's the case. I think the Eagles could win this game, putting up a point total like 24 or 28, and obviously that would stay below the 48.5 if that was the case. So anyway, looking forward to that game. Another game involving NFC West teams. What about St. Louis on the road in San Francisco? These teams look a lot different than the last time they played about a month ago, a little over a month ago. San Francisco winning that game 35-11, totally dominated. But St. Louis was really struggling at that time. They have really improved. Now, when we talk about their improvement like it's some sort of permanent thing, this has only been a 2-game thing for the St. Louis Rams. And it's interesting, the NFL, we know, is such a week-to-week league. Opinions and perception changes so much every week. And that's a prime example is the St. Louis Rams, because before this recent 2-game stretch, they had lost 3 consecutive games. They were, 3-6 at that time? But they've beaten the Indianapolis Colts and the Chicago Bears in blowout fashion in their last 2 games. Their offense has come alive, combined for 80 points in those 2 games. Tough to understand because that offense had been so bad up to that point. And of course, Sam Bradford, their starting quarterback, lost for the season. They've been going with Kellen Clemens, but since they've had success, they haven't been throwing the ball a whole lot. They've returned to power running. The St. Louis Rams have run right over the Indianapolis Colts and the Chicago Bears, but Entering those games, the Colts ranked 28th in rushing defense, the Bears 31st in rushing defense. So what really has gone on here is the St. Louis Rams have run over two teams that can't stop the run. They're going on the road now to play the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the 49ers are a team excellent on the defensive side of the ball, 7th in total defense, 4th in points allowed. Rushing defense, they're only okay, 12th in the NFL in rush yards allowed. So it'll be interesting to see if the Rams are able to get that running game going against the Niners this week. Zach Stacy, who's really emerged as a lead back in St. Louis, is questionable for this game. He was taken out of the last game with concussion-like symptoms. As of now, as of recording of this video, we haven't heard yet whether or not he was actually diagnosed with a concussion, but he is listed as questionable for Sunday's game in San Francisco. You might want to check that as the week progresses, because if Stacy is not able to play, Kellen Clemens and the Cunningham, Dale Richardson backfield, just not sure if I can see them having a whole lot of success against San Francisco. Of course, we're talking about Zach Stacy like he's some commodity. This guy's a rookie out of Vanderbilt. He's just emerged over the last few weeks, and he looks like one of the best running backs in the NFC as of now. Was having an excellent game last week against the Chicago Bears before being taken out of that game. And then his backup Cunningham came in and rushed for over 100 yards. So, again, we don't know if that was more the Chicago defense that was 31st in the league against the run and 26th in points allowed heading into that game, or if St. Louis has turned such a corner that they're just maybe one of the best rushing teams in the NFL now, and they're going to be able to cram it down San Francisco's throat. I don't really see that happening, but San Francisco has really been struggling on offense themselves. They are 32nd dead last in pass yards per game, 30th in total offense. And this Rams defense has been improving, and unlike the Rams offense, which I think might be sort of a mirage that is maybe due to their opposition over the last two games, again, neither Indianapolis or Chicago can stop the run. So I'm not sure we're going to continue to see the Rams offense to put up point totals like 38 and 42, which they have over the last two games. But the improvement on the Rams defense, I think that might be permanent, because the Rams were good defensively last year. They were young on that side of the ball, so we expected them to be even better this year. I thought they were going to be one of the top 6 or 7 defenses in the league. So it was very surprising to see them struggle over the first 7-8 weeks of the season. So really, the way they've been playing on that side of the ball recently is the way many people, myself included, expected them to play on that side of the ball all year long. So I do think the Rams are very good defensively. I think they're going to continue to be very good defensively over the next month. And San Francisco has struggled to get it going offensively this season, no doubt about it. An 8.5-point number here. San Francisco, an 8.5-point favorite on BETDAQ. To me, that feels like a lot of points. I think this is going to be a low-scoring, tight game. I do think San Francisco is going to be able to win this game. But 8.5 feels like a big number. I lean towards the Rams and the points. Under 42, another bet to look at. I keep saying under all these games. There's no fun to bet the under. I mean, how do you watch a game betting on the under? Tackle them in bounds, miss this field goal. You're always rooting for the defense. It's very frustrating. I've been there too many times. And sometimes you can be too right on an under bet. You can be so sure that defenses are going to dominate a game. What ends up happening is turnovers are created, defensive touchdowns, and the defenses dominate to such an extent that the point totals, it ends up going over the total because they set the offenses up with short fields and, as we said, defensive touchdowns and so forth. So you never know. You could get burned with an under bet like that, but I do lean towards St. Louis plus 8.5, under 42 in that Rams 49ers game. Final game I'd like to talk about, maybe the best game of the week. New Orleans Saints going on the road to take on the Seattle Seahawks. This is the Monday night game, the crown jewel of Week 13. This game, tremendously significant in the NFC playoff picture. Seattle and New Orleans are probably the two best home teams in the entire league. Two best home field advantages. New Orleans 22-5-1 against the spread in their last 28 home games, and Seattle had an incredible against the spread streak going at home. They had covered 12 out of 13 home games before a rough patch here earlier this year, a few weeks ago, when they won some close home games against bad teams like Tennessee and Tampa Bay. But the Seahawks do have it rolling again now. The Saints playing very well also. Saints have 2 losses, Seattle with 1 loss. If the season ended today, obviously Seattle would lock up home field in the NFC. I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, and I believe it. I believe the NFC's Super Bowl representative is going to be whichever of these two teams can lock down home field advantage. I believe the Saints and the Seahawks are the two best teams in the conference, and both teams are so good in their own building, especially New Orleans. It's because of the style of football, obviously, New Orleans plays. They spread it out. They like to throw the ball around. I know they've been running the football well this year also, but New Orleans averaging 70 more pass yards per game at home than on the road. When that offense gets on that fast track in the Superdome, they just go to a different level, and I don't think any team, Seattle Seahawks included, is going to be able to beat New Orleans in the Superdome in the playoffs this season. But if the Saints have to go on the road in Seattle, outdoors, cold weather, against that Seattle defense, are they going to be able to beat the Seahawks on the road in the playoffs? I have my doubts. So I believe whichever one of these teams can lock up home field advantage will win the NFC. That's my prediction at this point. Seattle obviously with an edge at this point because they're a game ahead in the standings. But this game is going to determine everything, especially if the Seahawks can win. If the Seahawks can win, they can basically salt it away. They are the overwhelming favorite to lock up home field advantage in the NFC. And then at that point, in my opinion, they become the overwhelming favorite to win the NFC. And the Seahawks a 6-point favorite on BETDAQ in this game, 47 the total. Be interesting to see. Keep your eye on the weather report. To me, there's a big difference here from a New Orleans perspective. If we're looking at 35-degree, 40-degree weather, rainy and windy in Seattle, which is common this time of year, or if we're looking at a 50-degree night that's relatively calm, the Saints have been playing so well on both sides of the ball. Saints are top 5 defensively in terms of points allowed, but if they do have a weakness on defense, it is that rushing defense. Only one team allows more yards per carry than the New Orleans Saints. Now, as we said, it hasn't really hurt them this season because they're 5th in the NFL in points allowed. But I expect the Seahawks to line up and try to run it right at the Saints. We saw the New York Jets, have a lot of success doing that 3 or 4 weeks ago. Chris Ivory rushing for 173 yards, I believe, against the Saints. Jets were able to win that game. The Jets are sort of like a poor man's Seattle Seahawks. They're worse all around, but similar style of football. Excellent defense. An offense is based around the power running game. Obviously, the Seattle offense can do a lot more. And now that Percy Harvin has been added into the mix, we'll see if he's used a little more this week. I have a feeling he will be. Hey, that could really put that Seattle Seahawks offense on an entirely different level. I believe Percy Harvin, one of the 10 best offensive players in the entire NFL. That includes quarterbacks, running backs, and maybe that's going a little far because he's coming off this injury. Remember, when Percy Harvin went down last season, he led the league in total yards from scrimmage. That's receiving and rush yards combined. This guy is an unbelievable player. And again, if he's 100% healthy, even if he's not 100% healthy, if he can be out there doing what he does, and we saw him make his debut last week, he was certainly quite impressive against his former team. But I expect him to get a little more action in this game. And as I said, that Seattle offense could be downright scary once Harvin is fully integrated. But the Seattle defense is down 2 cornerbacks. Walter Thurman and Brandon Browner, you've probably heard both these guys failing drug tests. Thurman suspended for the next 4 games. Browner expected to face a 1-year suspension. So Seattle weakened in the defensive backfield. I expect them to get it together. I mean, they still have plenty of players back there. They just signed Parrish Cox, who's done some things in the NFL. Certainly he was jobless for a reason, but Cox also has some off-the-field issues that was hurting him in his job hunt. So I think Seattle's going to be able to get it together. I think they're still going to be an above-average pass defense, even while Thurman is still away, and he'll be back in 4 weeks, as we said. But I'm not sure they're going to be able to get it together this week, the week they've lost those guys with the New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees coming to town. The Saints are 2nd in the NFL in total yards per game, passing offense, points per game. Only the Denver Broncos better in all 3 categories. And as we said, if the weather is decent, if Drew Brees is able to do his thing, it's going to be tough for Seattle, down 2 primary contributors in the secondary, to slow down this New Orleans offense, even though the game is in Seattle. 6 points. As we sit here right now, again, not knowing what the weather forecast is going to be for sure. I mean, a week in advance, those things are so unreliable. Usually weathermen don't even know what the weather is going to be like 48 hours in advance, but should be able to have a better idea then. But sitting here now, assuming we're not going to get really nasty weather, I lean towards New Orleans plus 6. As we said, Seattle weakened in the secondary. New Orleans has been playing so well on both sides of the ball. Even though the game's on the road in Seattle, 6 points, tough to turn down. But would I be shocked if the Seahawks just bulldoze the Saints, run it right down their throat, and if the New Orleans offense sort of bogs down up there in Seattle in the cold wind and against that fierce Seattle defense. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Should be an excellent game. Got confused between saying excellent and interesting there. We are 20 minutes into the video now. Sometimes I trip over my tongue at this point, but should be an excellent game and an interesting game. Really looking forward to it. As I said, many more games this week, many more interesting opportunities. 16 games, every team in action. Bye weeks are over. This is the best time of the NFL season. So many important games these next few weeks, and we haven't reached the point of the season where teams have locked things up and have started resting starters. So these next couple of weeks, really the best weeks in the regular season. We preview all these games, of course, in great detail here on BETDAQ NFL, so we do hope you check back over the course of the week. Until then, for BETDAQ NFL, I'm John Arnette.